So blue won. Everyone survived, and some people are furious about it. So Tim Urban posted on April 24th. Wow. At this point, 22.6 million people saw it. And within hours, X completely lost its mind. Because this isn't really a question about buttons. It's a question about whether you trust people. And the answer, I think, says a lot about you. So let's break it down. We'll do the red case, the blue case, and some reframes that kind of flip the answer a bit. And then what I actually think is going on here. Let's just explain the poll first real quick. Everyone in the world has to take a private vote by pressing a red or blue button. If more than 50% of people press the blue button, everyone survives. If less than 50% of people press the blue button, only people who press the red button survive. Which button would you press? So I'm going to go through some of these posts. There's so many. Okay. Let's go to this one. To start with the red case, you could say that red is the dominant strategy in game theory, meaning no matter what everyone else does, red is the best choice for you. So red literally has no losing scenario for the individual. Here's the thing. Red pressers aren't necessarily hoping blues die. Most of them are just being honest. Like, I don't trust 8 billion strangers to coordinate on anything. And they look around at the world, thinking, is that wrong? Like some other red cases, they could be, I'm not gambling my life on global coordination, and that's not selfishness, that's realism. That could be where they're coming from too. So this Fefe, Anon, they said, this classic Twitter question is cursed, but we've learned a lot about people since it went around on the timeline last time. First, let's get this out of the way. There is zero actual reason to push blue. None. There's no payoff to cooperation being modeled, since the payoff on offer, not dying, is the same for both choices. The only rational reason to pick blue is that you hope less than 50% of people pick blue so you can end your life and escape the person who is putting you in contrived hypotheticals for his own amusement. With that out of the way, what we've learned in the last 2 years since this hit the timeline the first time is that many, many people are simply next token predictors, and when they see this example, they will pick the cooperative choice, which isn't actually that. We have also learned that when confronted with the stupidity of this position, they will simply costlessly double down and argue about it forever rather than admit error. Really, the question is extremely revealing. Even Vittorio right here says, why would anyone even press blue? I guess based on Kofefe Anon's post, they're saying there's no actual cooperation payoff in this scenario. If everyone's rational and everyone presses red, survival's 100%, identical to the blue wins outcome. So blue doesn't add anything, it only introduces risk. The logical play, if everyone reasons correctly, is unanimous red, and nobody dies. The corollary would be blue pressers aren't being altruistic, they're being sloppy. They're pattern matching to cooperation equals good without actually thinking through the payoff matrix. Now, I want to name something here because it matters for understanding the debate. That argument, the strict dominance case, is, I think it's genuinely interesting, but the community making it loudest online tends to slide pretty quickly from blue pressers are irrational to things that got a lot uglier. The same thread that makes the clean game theory argument also contains people who are openly rooting for blues to die, who frame it as an evolutionary filter. It's not game theory anymore at that point. It's something else. And it's worth noticing when the logic stops and the ideology starts. I had to find the screenshot of this one because I didn't have the link for some reason. First, Beloved Eagle says, I'm 100% serious when I say that it is a moral imperative to press the red button. Pressing the blue button is immoral. We cannot survive in a universe with blue button pushers. And then Again, Kafefe Anon responds, they are evil, evil people. And then the next response is not necessarily evil, but definitely midwit. It's a perfect demonstration of the IQ bell curve meme. Both the super genius and the chimpanzee adjacent understand that red is the correct choice. Only the midwit is able to fool himself into thinking he should pick blue. And then that's followed by, this is an amazing point though. All of the truly depressingly non-thinking people will survive too. So he just agreed enthusiastically that red is also the chimpanzee's choice, the non-thinker's choice. The person who isn't reasoning at all will press red by instinct, survive, and populate the post-vote world too. So red is simultaneously the super genius play and the chimp play, which means the bell curve tells you exactly nothing. It just tells you that you pressed red. The midwit argument, when followed to its conclusion, undermines itself. Oh, and then we got a bonus. Tim made the red case himself. Yeah, it was posted the next day. Suddenly, standing alone in the room, I began my imagining humanity banding together and blue winning in a landslide, and I feel a rush of pride. Red is the genocide button. Blue is the save humanity from this nightmare button. I know what kind of person I am. As my hand hovers over the blue button, I can't help but imagine a gun pointing at my head with a bullet in one of the chambers. I feel a surge of fear shoot through my body. Then I think about all the other people staring at the blue button and thinking the same thing. Surely some of those who are initially decided to press blue will succumb to the fear. It starts to feel like a gun with 2 loaded chambers, a stronger pulse of terror. The more I think about it, the more I worry about other people thinking about it. My heart races. Then I look at the red button. A gun with no bullets in it. A glorious feeling of relief washes over me. Will I hate myself forever if blue wins because enough others were better and braver than me? But don't I owe it to my family to protect myself? One vote won't change anything anyway, right? It's all irrelevant because the mammal I live in has already made up its mind. I wince and press red. So after announcing that blue won, Tim Urban himself wrote a first-person internal monologue of what the red reasoning actually feels like from the inside. It starts with pride. Red is the genocide button. Blue is the save humanity button. You feel good. You're going to coordinate. Humanity is better than this. But then the doubt creeps in. What if not everyone reasons like you? One person defects, blue becomes a gun with 1 loaded chamber. 2 people defect, 2 loaded chambers, and suddenly pressing blue feels like Russian roulette. You have a family, you have kids. 1 vote doesn't change the outcome either way. So you reach for red and you hate yourself a little for it, but the mammal in you wins. The person who invented this poll, who writes about human nature for a living, looked at his own scenario and admitted he probably pressed the red button. In my opinion, it's intellectual honesty. And it's exactly why the question's hard. So let's look at who wants to live in a world populated by only red button pressers. Who wants cooperation, right? Okay. So now let's talk about some blue. So blue also includes the best possible outcome where 100% of humanity survives. Red only gets there if everyone presses the red button. So it's possible that 100% of humanity survives with red, but only if every single person presses red. So it's a lot more unlikely, in my opinion. The best and most likely scenario that red can do is for the individual, is that you will survive. So blue's a much more likely scenario that everyone survives. So let's read this one from Andrew McCarthy. I'm solidly on Team Blue out of self-preservation. Let's say I push the red button, like 60% of people. 40% of the world dies. The next day I go to the grocery store. The store didn't open because the managers that all have the keys all picked blue. We break windows to steal food, but the food is not replenished, as the truckers that survived are concerned for their own family's survival as the world descends into chaos and stay home. This problem is echoed across every factory in every industry. Supply chains are fragile, and a 40% labor shortage across most industries would collapse them before they have time to restabilize under the new, lower demand. Survivors that manage critical infrastructure abandon their jobs to make sure they can provide for their families, as even if their paychecks are uninterrupted, you can't eat money. Neighborhoods would tear themselves apart as people compete for resources. Human life has a very short expiration date once people start going hungry, and civilization is more fragile than you'd think. Yes, if everyone pushed the red, everyone would live, but you know that won't happen. The only way to guarantee your family's survival isn't to vote red, but blue, and hope enough people followed your logic and did the same. Pushing the red button seems smart on the surface, but is the more dangerous option if you think critically about the long-term consequences. And then you can see the first response here is 100% of people push the red, then 100% of people survive. Yeah, but we know that won't happen. I agree. It's very unlikely that every single person out of 8 billion are going to press the red button. It's possible, but it's not actually going to happen. I agree with Andrew. If a huge chunk of humanity dies, everything that we know about our civilization today is gone. Like, everything breaks. So think about it. If 42% of humanity dies, billions of people, what happens? Supply chains collapse, power grids go down, food systems fail, the winners inherit a dying civilization. You press red and you survive the vote and then starve 6 months later because the global economy's gone. So from this line of thinking, blue isn't naive, as many have said. Blue's actually the long game. And then there's the values argument. Who wants to live in a world populated only by red pressers? A planet where every single person, when faced with a choice, chose themselves over everyone else? That sounds like a world that doesn't sound like a place I'd want to live. Some blues said they'd genuinely rather die in a world that tried to cooperate than survive in one that didn't. I don't think that's virtue signaling. I think that's a coherent set of values. Okay, so this guy, Lion Kimbrough, he's responding to the Kofefe Anon post, but he's responding first to this part where they said, first to get this out of the way, there's actually zero reason to push blue. None. So he says, no, I'm going to stop you right there. The payoff for pressing blue, should blue win the vote, is that nobody dies. Nobody. You wake up in the morning after the vote, and you see in the news that nobody died. Most people voted not to kill anybody because most people voted not to commit murder in order to save their own skin. Or you press the red button, and so do a majority of the people. You wake up, and millions, maybe even billions of people have been killed, and you help do it. That's not payoff. That's not a positive payoff. That's not anything worth having. That's a nightmare. It's got a good point. So red pressers argue they bear no responsibility for what happens to blue pressers because they're removing themselves from it by pressing red. But Lion's point is you do. The moment red becomes the majority choice, you're part of the mechanism that killed billions of people. You didn't pull the trigger, but you loaded the gun. So blue isn't necessarily a suicide pact, it's a refusal to be complicit. And there's another one I saw from QC. So here's an argument that I think actually defeats the game theory case for red. So QC says, I completely missed this discourse the first time, so let me try. I pressed blue without thinking about it. My gut reaction was blue is pro-social and red is anti-social. On reflection, this still seems right to me. Galaxy brain game theory arguments in favor of red are completely missing the point. As others have pointed out, empirically blue wins, and this is a test of theory of mind more than anything else. The actual outcome is determined by what everyone else who is not you actually does. not by what game theory says they should do. A certain kind of nerd thinks game theory is just the correct framework for reasoning about this type of situation, and that is absolutely not true either, and can be questioned on intellectual grounds and not just vibes. Among other things, game theory assumes that every participant is perfectly selfish and perfectly rational, and that this is common knowledge among the participants. This is just totally false as a description of the actual world. Multiple parents pointed out that parents have to remember that this test includes their children. And obviously, the vast majority of people have never even heard of game theory, but they do know what selfishness and selflessness are. Funnily enough, there's LW stuff around exotic decision theories that's actually relevant here. One of them I would describe roughly as, when you make a decision, you are choosing to live in a world where people like you make decisions like that. And I'd rather choose to live in a world where people like me are pro-social. Blue is pro-social and red is anti-social, is also a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more people who believe it, the more true it becomes. So believing it is partly a bet on how much other people believe it, partly an act of hyperstition to make it true. So he's saying that game theory assumes everyone's perfectly rational and perfectly selfish, but that's not the world that we live in. Most people, especially parents, don't reason that way. They think about their kids. They think about other people. Their gut isn't a failure of logic. It's an accurate read of how humans actually behave. So when you press blue, you're not making a naive bet. You're making an empirical prediction that enough people reasoning the way real humans reason will also press blue. And the polls, including this one, keep proving that prediction correct. There's also a deeper cut here from decision theory. The choice of blue is self-fulfilling. Every person who reasons blue is the pro-social choice, and enough people think like me and presses blue, makes it more true. Blue isn't just a bet on humanity, it's a contribution to the outcome it's betting on. Red can never do that. Red is a hedge. Blue is a vote. And in a world where the vote is literally the mechanism, pressing blue is the act of cooperation, not just a hope for it. And it got a little more interesting because once this went viral, people started remixing it, and every remix seems to reveal something different about what's really going on. Let's start with this one. So on the left we have a frantic person screaming about game theory. Anyone who chooses blue has it coming. Save yourself. The odds are clear. Don't you know game theory? Think about other human lives like variables in a math equation. Screw morals. And on the right, there's the Giga Chad. His entire counter argument is nobody needs to die. So the joke is that the more elaborate and passionate the red argument gets, the worse it sounds. And blue's response doesn't need to match the energy. It just needs to point out the obvious, that things got lost in all the math. Nobody needs to die. Pretty simple. Keep that in mind as we go through the reframes. So the first one that I had pinned is from the Chaos Ledger. So someone reposted it like this, and they used AI to make an image. So they posted, "You're trapped in a glass box. Water is filling it. Red button. Door opens immediately. You walk out dry. Blue button. Door opens only if 4.2 billion other people also press blue." So what happens here in this situation? Probably almost everyone smashes the red button. Like 70 to 80% of the same people who said blue in the first original poll. The math is identical, but because it feels real, now it's your actual death, not a hypothetical. They reframed it with different verbiage. The math is technically the same, but it's not the same question because of how you're asking it. The brutal detail from the thread was when they asked, what if you could switch from blue to red as the water rises, and almost everyone switches? One version tests your philosophy, the other tests your survival instinct. People give different answers. Another variant was the virus variant. Blue equals a vote against releasing a virus. Red, you get immunity, but your vote releases it. Same structure, but now red feels murderous, right? Your rational self-interest is explicitly killing other people. Same math, different moral gut reaction. Another one, oh, it's gone. That's a bummer. I have some notes here about what it was. It was the blender variant. It was step into a blender. If 50% plus of people step in, nothing happens. If less than 50%, the blenders activate. That one was pretty absurd on purpose, I'm assuming. It makes blue sound like collective suicide. Basically, nobody picks it. But the logic is exactly the same as blue in the original poll, which is worth thinking about. We'll go to this one, the $100 gift card. So funny how progs will berate you for picking red. If you change the result from life, death to win $100, win nothing, do they think the red button pressers stole from the blue button pressers? So in this case, it's if you press red, you get $100. Blue, everyone gets 100, but only if 50% plus press blue. No life or death, just money, still mostly red, which kind of undercuts the idea that blue was ever really about altruism. It was about not wanting to feel responsible for other people's deaths. If you take death off the table, the cooperation point kind of drops fast, I guess. What was another one? Let's see. So this was interesting too. This person is talking about all the reframes, saying, I'll read this one first. It says, every human stands in front of a massive wood chipper. You can either jump into the wood chipper or not. The wood chipper has a design flaw. If more than 50% of humanity jumps in, it will break and everyone survives. If less than 50% do it, those people will die. What do? And 85.9% chose do not jump into the wood chipper. So basically, they press the red button. And so someone had reposted it with this response saying, these reframes are ridiculous because the hypothetical they invent always positions the blue button analog as requiring more effort than the red analog, when in the original scenario it takes equal effort to push either button. They make a fair point. All the reframes seem to be stacking the deck. The original poll has 2 equal button presses. The glass box has rising water. The blender adds physical discomfort. The wood chipper obviously is another physical discomfort. They make blue harder, which isn't a fair test. I still think that the reframe still reveals something. Your answer isn't really a moral position. It's a framing response. If you change the emotional loading, keep the exact same structure, you change the right answer. That should unsettle us a little bit, I think, because that means our ethical intuitions aren't always principled. They could be vibes, contextual, emotional, totally malleable. So what was Tim Urban actually asking? I don't think it's, are you selfish or altruistic? I think it's simpler. I think he's asking, do you believe in humanity? Not do you love humanity, but do you believe that given a clear choice with clear stakes, more than half of 8 billion people would cooperate? The funny thing is, you have to think about Tim's audience as well. So people who read long-form essays about the Fermi paradox and human nature skewed blue, no surprise, 58 to 42, but if you ran the same poll on 4chan, if I had to bet money, I would probably say 80% red. Same question, but a completely different result. The right answer is determined by your sample, so the poll is a little bit self-fulfilling. I think that's the real insight. We don't all live in the same room, and what you believe about humanity depends entirely on which room you've been spending time in. So, where do I land? I lean blue. I know that's probably not going to surprise you based on how I've been talking about it. But here's why. So, not because I'm naive about human nature, but because I think things like the glass box version are actually cheating. The glass box makes it personal and immediate. The real scenario isn't personal and immediate, it's abstract and collective. Exactly the kind of situation where humans actually do coordinate. We built cities, we've built the internet. None of that happens if red is how we actually operate. I think the glass box reframe tests are lizard brain, but the original post tests are higher reasoning, and I want to make decisions from a higher reasoning standpoint. That said, the glass box did give me genuine pause because I don't know how I'd behave if the water was actually rising, and I think that honesty matters. So I choose blue, but with humility. I think the poll isn't really about buttons. It's asking you to locate yourself on the spectrum between trust and distrust of other humans. And neither answer is wrong. They just come from different lived experiences, different priors, different rooms. What's worth examining is why you answered the way you did. Not to change your answer, but to understand it. So, which button did you press? Drop it in the comments, and more importantly, why? I'm curious to know. I find myself going through a long rabbit hole of reading everyone's arguments for red versus blue. Yeah, this is a great question. I love these kind of polls. So, yeah, if you enjoy this kind of a breakdown, let me know, because I can do more of these. I found myself going through such a rabbit hole, I figured I would just make a video to talk about it at least. Yeah. All right. Later.